There is nothing more demoralizing for me as a consumer than seeing developers tell me one thing about their game leading up to its launch, and then playing something completely different and significantly inferior. Those who've been following the gaming industry will be no stranger to infamous cases of downgrades and false marketing for highly anticipated titles. Ubisoft in particular is notorious for this, with Watch Dogs and The Division being perfect examples of games whose E3 presentations nowhere near lived up to the final product. Most recently, Bethesda hyperbolically marketed Fallout 76 with infamous lines like 16 times the detail, only to ship a game that was not only poorly conceptualized and horribly executed, but also lied about the contents of its collector's edition. Joining the club of games that woefully failed to deliver on promises and expectations is Electronic Arts and Bioware's Anthem, whose most prominent showcases nowhere near accurately portrayed the final product. One user in the Anthem subreddit compiled some of the features we saw in past gameplay footage that are now completely missing in a thread titled, "Whatever happened to these things?" Just a few examples of what we have seen previously that's absent from the game we got. Attached to the post is an image featuring various screenshots highlighting examples of visual and design elements from marketing footage that cannot be found in Anthem's final release. Many of you will know that one of Anthem's most disruptive issues has been loading screens and how prevalent they are throughout the experience. Aside from loading times having been able to take minutes before future patches mitigated this, the frequency at which loading screens appear continues to be an issue. They'll pop up when transitioning to and from Fort Tarsis and the open world, to and from the open world and instanced interiors and or underground environments, to and from Fort Tarsis and the Forge on occasions, anytime players have to respawn, anytime players are too far away from teammates and are teleported to them, so on and so forth. But if you look at old promotional footage of Anthem, you'll see that all transitions between various segments of the game were completely seamless. In the E3 2017 gameplay trailer, you can see how going from Fort Tarsis into the open world played a pleasant, smooth, brief transition animation that saw the player character walk out of Fort Tarsis into the open world, whereas in the final game, selecting a mission will show a bland loading screen right before javelin-clad characters drop down outside of Fort Tarsis. Now, the E3 2018 gameplay demo did show some loading between the hub and the open world, but that build hid much of the loading with smooth transition animations that do not exist in the final game. While we're at it, let's talk about how the E3 2018 gameplay demo showed players being able to launch missions from striders, which you cannot do in the final game. Hell, from the way this player is looking around inside the strider, the impression many got was that we would be able to walk around and explore strider interiors, and the video's developer commentary even suggests that striders would act as forward operating bases where players can return to customize their javelin's loadout and appearance, but we obviously know none of this made it.
Our expedition starts in the player's strider. This is your forward base of operations. Here you can equip your javelin with a wide array of gear, weapons, and abilities, as well as customize your appearance to show off your own personal style and flair.
While we're on the topic of transitions, something else the Reddit user pointed out in this image was how the E3 2018 gameplay demo showed players could enter strongholds straight from the open world. Indeed, if you check the E3 2018 video out, you'll notice both the footage and the commentary highlight this aspect.
By now you've probably noticed that Traversal plays a really important role in Anthem. As you run, fly, and swim through, above, and below the world, you can discover some pretty amazing things. Like right now, our squad just discovered the secret underwater entrance to the Scar Stronghold. Strongholds are a 4-player mode that give greater rewards by taking on greater challenges. Once you discover a stronghold, you'll have access to it from your map at the start of any expedition.
We now know, of course, that these are blatant lies, as the final game requires players to go back to Fort Tarsis and select strongholds from a menu instead, with no way to jump between missions from within the open world. Going back to the Reddit user's image, there was also mention of how dynamic occurrences in the open world showcased in past footage no longer exist. In the E3 2018 gameplay demo, the player at one point blows up a Scar tower, which you cannot do in the final game, and right after that, the player flies down to find Scar turrets shooting at wyverns in the vicinity, which doesn't happen in the final game either. More examples of falsely marketed dynamic open world elements can be seen in the E3 2017 gameplay trailer, which showed the player character stumbling upon herds of creatures stampeding their way through the world, wildlife dynamically interacting with each other like this Ursix flinging Wolven around, and Striders being taken down in epic fashion by hostile factions. The Reddit user even noticed that the way enemies appear felt more dynamic in old footage, pointing out how back in E3 2018, scars would emerge from the ground, rather than appear all bunched up through a portal as they do now. Furthermore, back in E3 2017, scars could be found roaming certain areas of the map and flooding in during combat encounters as if they had settled in this territory, giving the world a much more lived-in feel, but in the final game they just kind of teleport in. Finally, the Reddit user also pointed out some key gameplay features that have been excluded, starting with free play markers. Indeed, if you look at gameplay from E3 2017, you can see a marker on the HUD indicating a distant point of interest, and later in the footage, the player discovers a mysterious cave that is marked as a potential mission that could be tackled some other time. The lack of markers is a major issue in Anthem's current build. One of free play's main attractions is supposed to be world events, but because the game doesn't show you when and where these are taking place on the map, and because players don't have the ability to place custom pings and markers, navigating the expansive open world can be a major hassle. It's such an elementary feature for any co-op focused open world shooter looter, and yet something so simple that's been shown in past Anthem footage is incomprehensibly absent in the final game. I just don't get it. Another missing gameplay feature the Reddit user highlighted was players' ability to seamlessly invite friends or join friends sessions mid-mission. This is something we saw towards the end of the E3 2017 gameplay trailer when players Kim and Sandra joined the fray right before they headed into this other non-existent cool dynamic world event, and we saw this feature demonstrated once more during E3 2018 when another player Storm Javelin joined the mission halfway through. Now, this next one isn't something the Reddit user highlighted, though others have, but another gameplay feature shown in the E3 2017 footage was the ability to immediately identify picked up loot and equip them on the fly. In the final game, players have to go back to Fort Tarsis and into the Forge to identify and manage loot, which is a pain in the ass and completely counterproductive to the type of game Anthem is striving to be. The overall feel of combat also seems much more impactful in the E3 2017 build, with guns packing a punch in a way they never do in the retail build.
Hang in there. Almost there.
Let's also take some time to talk about Anthem's visuals. One of the most notable downgrades on that front was Fort Tarsis, which looked like it was brimming with life in the E3 2017 gameplay trailer, while the setting looks utterly lifeless in the final game. There's a great video by YouTuber Nick930 that breaks down the visual differences, but it really doesn't take a discerning eye to see what a stark difference there is between the E3 2017 build and the retail build. It's not just the environmental details that are sorely lacking now in the hub town. NPC animations feel much more cookie-cutter and simplified, crowd sizes have been significantly reduced, and the way players meet and converse with NPCs does not feel nearly as dynamic or as seamless as the E3 2017 footage made it out to be. Similar downgrades can be found in the open world, which Nick930 also breaks down in his video. Aside from various gameplay features and dynamic elements having been stripped, the world definitely looks less expansive, less detailed, and less alive all across the board. There's also stuff like developers having stated that the shared world nature of the game means that everyone will be experiencing the same thing at the same time, from the game's day and night and weather cycle to world events, when in reality free play sessions are instanced with a limited number of players. I also discussed in my Anthem campaign review promises BioWare made regarding the game's narrative and how the whole Our World, My Story structure would work, all of which turned out to be complete bullshit.
Back within the safety of Fort Tarsis is where my story begins. This is your chance to develop a richly personal narrative where your choices have consequences. In this bustling trader town, you'll develop bonds with your pit crew who can help you prepare for future battles. They're the people in the world who have your back. And as your relationships develop, you'll learn about their pasts and the future they hope to see. Fort Tarsis is ripe for exploration as well. You may even encounter shadowy figures with questionable character. It all depends on the decisions you make. This is real-time storytelling, a reinvention of personal narrative in a multiplayer game.
When I play the game, there wasn't a single time I experienced anything remotely like what was described in this trailer. This is just the tip of the iceberg. If you go back and read Anthem articles, listen to Anthem interviews, and look at Anthem footage, you'll find an abundance of lies and hyperboles regarding this game. Now, with this particular Reddit post having garnered a huge amount of attention with over 11,500 upvotes, it eventually caught the attention of BioWare lead producer Ben Irving, who responded with an attempt to explain and justify what players are perceiving as lies and downgrades. Here's what he had to say. The short answer is that the cost of transparency is things change. We did our best to be transparent on the journey to going live, but with that, we knew things would be different in some situations. Sometimes people would be happy and sometimes they would be upset. It's the cost of transparency. To elaborate, game development is full of change. There are a million reasons why you set out with an idea and it evolves over time. This is common in every game. We shared as much as we could. Some things change. So the cost of transparency is that some things we said become not true, not because someone was dishonest, but because it changed over the course of development. Okay, look, I'm not denying that game development is an iterative process during which changes and unforeseen circumstances are constant, where things can get added or scrapped at a moment's notice. But with Anthem, we are dealing with a rather extreme case that I think many will agree cannot be justified by this explanation. And this is something that was perfectly explained by Reddit user Karamomi in this retort, which reads, quote, "I get your point. I think people are more than willing to accept changes as the game development advances. But I'm afraid what the game has seen ultimately was pretty much exclusively downgrades. Smaller world, worse graphics, worse inventory, less immersion, more simplistic narratives, etc. I'm sure people would have been fine with losing some and gaining some, but I don't think we can say that's the case. And after being at the receiving end of this very similar thing for a few years now, Watch Dogs, Destiny, No Man's Sky, The Division, Fallout 76, etc., you honestly kind of get tired of making excuses. It just so dangerously borderlines false advertising at this point. Many people genuinely wish you guys nothing but the best, but I think this dev-player relationship will only work if more good flows both ways. I couldn't have said it better myself, and it's not just borderline false advertising, it is straight up false advertising. It's one thing for a game to undergo adjustments like Insomniac's Spider-Man did, which changed the texture of Spider-Man's main suit and moved some assets like puddles around, leading to claims of downgrades that ultimately fizzled out when people realized that despite differing personal tastes, the graphical fidelity was still all around top-notch, and the core game played as great as it looked in promotional videos. But it's a whole other thing to flat out oversell a game's core functionalities, features, and visuals like Anthem did, to show a vastly superior version that was not realistically attainable for the final release, and to justify under-delivering on such a grand scale with the excuse that things changed during development. Keep in mind that Anthem's lies didn't just start and end with its E3 2017 showcase from over a year and a half before launch. Misleading footage and false claims about what we can expect were presented in Anthem's E3 2018 blowout 8 months before launch, and the Our World My Story trailer, which is also packed with blatant lies, was released a mere 5 months before the game's launch. BioWare surely knew 5 months in advance that Anthem's narrative wouldn't shape up to be as dynamic as the trailer made it out to be, that there were plenty of exaggerations being spouted in that trailer, and yet they chose to put the misleading video out anyway. Making this all the more inexcusable is the fact that BioWare implied that the game would not undergo downgrades. Back in April 2018, when the only gameplay of Anthem we had seen was from E3 2017, a user on Reddit asked if the gameplay seen so far is still representative of the final game, and BioWare technical design director Brennan Holmes responded with, "Yup, I'm sure you'll see confirmation of this soon." But looking back at this retroactively, we know this is false. This isn't the first time BioWare has pulled something like this either. Remember Mass Effect Andromeda? Remember how visually stunning the game looked in early publicly released footage compared to how the final game turned out? Especially that one cutscene showing Sarah Ryder waking up from cryogenic stasis? BioWare needs to understand that there's only so much leeway and sympathy you'll get with the excuse that things change during game development. BioWare needs to understand that people are spending their hard-earned money to play the game they were told they would get, so there are only so many unexpected detrimental changes players can tolerate before justifications like these ring hollow and come off empty. There's also only so far you can stretch the definition of the word change. Alterations to Spider-Man's suit texture and to the placement of puddles are changes. The complete removal of some of Anthem's previously showcased core elements, on the other hand, are downgrades, plain and simple. And I don't accept the notion that downgrades on such a grand scale are the cost of transparency. I say such downgrades are the result of game publishers and/or developers jumping the gun on marketing, the result of knowingly showing and promising more than what can be realistically delivered in order to generate misleading hype, the result of their grand visions and ambitions blinding them from what's tangible within the confines of their capabilities and resources, and the result of rushing a game out unfinished in a compromised state with the intention of delivering on some key promises months or years down the line. There is no excuse, BioWare, especially when there are so many games out there that deliver an experience that's relative and proportional to what their marketing campaign presented, all while delivering a solid, comprehensive, and complete product. These are one man's thoughts and opinions anyway. I'd love to hear what your take is on Anthem's downgrades and BioWare's response in the comments below. With that, I would like to end this news update and discussion video. Thank you for tuning in. To be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on YongYea. I'll see you guys next time. Yong out.